Okay, we are going, and
Okay.
I spent no time trying to think of an intro again, but which we don't have to worry about because we're new. But we should specifically say our names. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Mac.
Yeah, woohoo!
Yay.
Look, we did it. Okay,
Woo!
this is our woohoo. This is our Indiana Jones saga thing we're doing. We're on Temple of Doom, and I think what you're about to say is very similar to how I felt. If I'm predicting your facial expressions accurately, it's exactly how I felt the first time I watched.
But I'm an
this
enigma.
movie.
You have no idea what I'm thinking.
It's really not true. Um, you might think it is, but it's not. But I'm gonna let you start. But
Okay.
I do think it's possible you will go down the same path with this movie that I did, because this is like the third or fourth time I've seen it all the way through. Because I rewatched it today, like we're supposed to. So go ahead. Your thoughts on Temple of Doom?
Okay. Well, start out with some of the things I noted that I liked.
Yes.
I did like it more than the first one, actually. I felt like there was more of an emotional, or in the first one, it was largely just trying to get the thing, or trying to keep other people from getting the thing.
Try to get
which is like the whole from what I'm gathering of these two movies, that's kind of the whole Indiana Jones franchise. But and that makes sense for what it is, and I'm not sure why I thought it was something else, but
I'm curious
whatever.
as to what you thought it was.
I don't know. I just, because so many people loved this franchise, I was just like, this has to have something really good to it, and I think
it's fun action to go get the thing, and everyone loves Alien franchise because it's don't die. Everyone loves RoboCop because it's shoot bad guy. Like they're fairly simple when you break them down.
Yeah. Well, and
Back to the Future's whole thing is in the title. There's no spoilers.
I like this one better because there was more of a reason for everything to go down, even though it made like the beginning of it was very like classic. It felt very much like the first one, where it's just him with a thing, and there's like unnecessary amounts of danger and drama happening with this. Also, classic mistake to drink a drink.
I know. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. I was like, Dr. Jones.
I mean, he like downed it. I was like, dude.
I think honestly, if I could guess, we did talk about this a little bit next week. And I don't want to cut you off, but you know how we talk. This is before Raiders of the Lost Ark. He is younger.
Oh,
and I think yes. So I think that's supposed to be an indication that he's not fully into the whole action adventure hero thing. Just even though they imply and they reference other adventures that he's been on, he's not fully there yet. Otherwise, that's just stupid. And it's not something I feel that a mistake he'd make in the first one, the third one, the fourth one, or the fifth one. So I think this is like technically chronologically, there's like a show. We don't have to talk about it. This is like his first adventure that we see in a movie. And I think that's just meant to indicate that he's not full Jones yet, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, he is Indiana Jones. He's not James Bond, even though he only exists because Steven Spielberg wanted to make a James Bond movie and never had the opportunity to. That's the only reason this exists at all. Oh,
that explains
it really
a
does,
lot.
doesn't it? This whole opening for the second one is basically
I was like when I watched it, I was like, is this now a spy movie?
Right.
And then they got to the artifact thing pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, I understand now. But it was just
anyway, that's why I think he does that, is because he's not thinking it through yet. He's learning stuff. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I actually did. I mean, just kind of dropping us into the moment, I think worked. I think I like the chaos element of the fact that he takes the singer hostage, and then she just ends up being his companion for the entire trip. Like that's the kind of funny thing that does work for me. I thought that was funny. And the kid just kind of shows up out of nowhere, and I think he explains him at some point.
Yeah,
he does. Yeah.
You're gonna tell me you don't love Short Round? He's like my favorite character in this whole franchise.
He was cute. And actually, what's interesting is I feel like having the kid around made a really big difference in the characterization of Indiana Jones, because throughout this entire movie, he's doing his classic indie thing, which is like, I don't care about anything except for the stuff that I care about, which is super weird and usually glory and or violence based. And
Go on.
but in this movie, they made an intentional effort to make him have a soft spot for like protecting or taking care of kids. And that I think is what I liked about it. That and the fact that they humanize him a little bit. Like I'm not really crazy about the way they write the relationship between Willie and Indy.
Oh yeah.
But
it's very 80s.
I like the scene where they're struggling almost like equals in that one scene where she's like, you'll be over here in 5 minutes. And he'd be like, no, I won't. I'll be asleep in 5 minutes. And they parallel the two going back and forth. Like I can see how the battle of wills seems a little bit more even in that sort of situation than in the previous one. But she was a strong character. She just like the origin and history of their relationship is a little confusing. So then they go, like when they fall off the plane, my suspension of disbelief was completely shattered.
Was it really? They opened a portal to heaven in the last movie. They can't jump out of a plane in this one? Is that what? At the very least,
the portal to heaven was like built up to. This was just, they got in a raft and therefore they survived falling out of an airplane and falling off of like a 100-foot cliff.
Had been 10 when you watch it like most people are, you would have loved it.
I don't know.
I was in a similar boat.
I was giving advice to the Ice Age characters when I was 6 about drop stopping and rolling when they caught on fire. So I am
See, I had seen the Mythbusters episode where they tested whether or not that was possible before I had seen the movie. So I believe they walked away with it's not possible to do that and survive. But I didn't care at that point.
I mean, I tried to factor in like wind resistance. They landed on snow. They were close to the land. Like, you know, how far they fell shouldn't have been that far. But they make a point out of showing them fall in the sky for like a very long time.
Yeah.
And and then they fall off the cliff. And it's like, if they had stopped right before the cliff, I think I would have been like, okay, I believe you. But you know, consciously no, but like, you know, while I'm watching the story, I'm like, it's fine, it's a movie, whatever. But then they fall off the cliff and it's like the same amount of distance as they just fell before. This time water, sure. But the fact that it didn't land like on one end and then flip over on top of them, as I'm sure it did in several shots that just you don't get to see. It's just like I couldn't do it at that point. I was like, all right, whatever.
Noted. We don't like the raft scene.
I don't know. I'm trying to get through it, but I think my struggle is, and this is actually moving into my issues with what I think is going to be the franchise, actually. I don't feel like there is enough buy-in with the characters for these extended action scenes. Every piece of dialogue feels like an excuse to set up an action scene. Like everything is oriented around the action. There's not a single piece of it that is actually interested in the history of the thing or in the relationships of the characters. Like there's no substance to any of it.
Yeah,
and I'm having a hard time with that.
I will say that definitely improves as the movies go on. It's definitely not the point of those first two, for sure. I can totally understand why you wouldn't like that, but I do think it kind of comes down to it's just not that kind of movie, and it's just. And I know, and then that's the conclusion I'm reaching. I'm like, I'm okay with it not being that kind of movie. I just don't know if that kind of movie is for me. That's fair.
So I'm gonna finish the franchise, but it's like I don't know. I'm not buying in a whole lot.
That's fair. So okay, when I first saw this one, I couldn't stand it.
Really?
I hated this movie. Willie,
you didn't even like the fact that the club was named Club Obi-Wan?
I was going to ask you if you noticed that, because I do love that. I love that the club is named Obi-Wan. So no, I didn't like that the opening scene has next to nothing to do with the bulk of the movie. I didn't like Willie at all, because I didn't really get.
She's obnoxious.
Well, she is, but like the more I'll come back to like that. But like, I didn't like that. I didn't like that the goal was more ambiguous than the other ones. The other ones are straight up National Treasure before National Treasure. Every single one, there's a specific item. This one, yeah, there kind of is, but it is different.
It is. The motivation is not get the item. The motivation is save the village by getting the item.
It's a little different. And then I had felt that the whole third act was just kind of noisy and too long. But then you're agreeing with me. I'm about to flip on you.
Well, I'm fully aware. Like, I can see both sides of, I think, where you're going with this. I actually did take issue. I didn't quite get there, but like the action scene, like in the third act, like they go from, like I have like 5 different action scenes strung together in one really long action sequence. And I'm honestly, by the time they get to the bridge, I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm done.
No, I totally feel that. I totally feel that. Upon watching it again, though, I used to like Raiders way more than this. I like this one so much more than Raiders now. It's kind of weird how it's flipped. So I didn't realize what the point of Willie was until I watched someone else talk about it. And then I was like, okay, no, that kind of works. So, like, she's meant to be the total opposite of Marion in every way. And that's why, like, we watch it in, like, that dynamic. And the older I get, the more I relate to her. Because, like, watching this when I was younger, and I can imagine watching this as a kid, because, like, with other movies with characters like her, it's like, can you just shut up and let the awesome action man save the day? Look at him being badass, chilling in the middle of the jungle, and just playing cards. And now I'm thinking, I can't think of anything I'd like to do less than what they put her through. Like, well, I totally, like, she's still kind of annoying, but I understand her perspective more as, like, you kind of watch it from her point of view. And then when you do pay attention and you get past her being annoying, she's not a stupid character, which is nice. She is still a competent character. I really, really do like now Indy's motivations in this. It starts out loosely as honor and glory, but it's still very much throughout the whole thing, even when the honor and glory part comes after he's already motivated to try to help save the kids. Like, he's in it to help people, and then he gives the rock back at the end. So I kind of feel like the beginning motivations of this movie and the end motivations of this movie are flipped from the first movie, and they don't belong together. Because he goes from, in the first movie, it's like, this is so awesome. The honor and glory of finding this thing, like, I should really be doing that. Like, this, I really want to go find the Ark for the fame of it all. And then in the end, he's like, no, this needs to be preserved and put in a museum. And it's like, by the time Raiders of the Lost Ark has happened, you should be past that already. Yeah. You should not give a shit at all, because that's the whole arc of this movie, is you not caring about that anymore. So him only caring about honor and glory, because, like, the first mission, if you will, in the Club Obi-Wan, he's found this urn with, like, what, the first Chinese king or emperor ever,
and he's selling it to some underground
diamond, and they aren't even they don't even imply that that's like a rare or special jewel. It's just money.
It's just a big diamond.
He's just selling it for money. He's just straight up selling it, and then the rest of the movie is just altruistic saving of a village, no honor, no glory. It's like, okay, so these seem mismatched a little bit. Yeah. Like, the what he does in the first movie should be most of this movie, and what he ends up doing in this movie should be most of the first movie, if that makes sense. So, but, like, now, though, it is fun to see younger Indy and to see what he was like in Club Obi-Wan, to see what he... Because, like, if you ignore that the first one is inconsistent with this, and you consider this, in a way, the first one, it's interesting to watch that growth. And to see him, again, with Short Round kind of feeling attached to this mission. And I fully love Short Round. I love Data in Goonies. I love him in this so much. He's a breath of fresh air. And then I didn't like the Temple of Doom itself. It felt a little weird. But again, the more I watch it, they do a lot with a little, in a way. A lot of the end takes place in basically the same environment. And even though I agree, because you agreed with my agreeing, that the action scenes feel like they go on for a bit, watching it this time, I don't know. I was just fully into it this time around. Like I was there for the ride, knowing what it was, and I just like watching how each action scene just keeps leading into the next one. I like him punching the guy while Short Round's right behind him punching the kid, and you can see them both in the same shot. I like the rail ride. I don't know. I think the only part I'm not as crazy about is when they're dangling. This is going to reveal
a little ignorance,
okay.
But you keep saying the ride. There's an actual ride of this, right? Like somebody has to have made a roller coaster.
I think there has to be, but I don't know. It has to be. Like I think it has to exist, like at Universal or something, or it did at one point.
Right.
If it doesn't, that's insane. That I was thinking that while watching it. I'm glad that we both understood. Like I like that. The only part where I feel it kind of drags is maybe when they're dangling Willie over the lava, but at the same time, that's when Short Round brings Indy back, and that's like the most heartfelt moment of the movie, and I'm so invested in that.
There are a few moments in this where the character motivations and the situation they're in actually makes for an interesting story. And that's one of them, where the motivations of the character is contrary to what he is compelled to do. And I really like, actually, I mean, I find her annoying throughout most of the movie, but that annoying character, like the way that she acts, actually leads really well to the moment where she has to basically yell at him constantly to try and get him to come to his senses. Like it works really well for the character in that moment. And then of course it pulls on the heartstrings where, Short Round is the one who's like, waking him up, and then they have their whole like,
I love you. Oh.
Yeah. So cute. And that humanizes the character because it is a human relationship where he feels responsible for the kid that brings him back. Like, all of that is really good. Some of my favorite conversations are the conversations that they have in the village. Because, they're all acting like themselves. Short Round's running around being a kid, and Indy's learning and speaking to the people, and Willie's being extremely uncomfortable. That little fly that lands on her food.
I know.
That was such a great coincidence. I can't imagine that they planned that out. That looks like a very real fly. So, like, there you go. And then the conversation they have about, like, the food and...
I like that conversation a lot. It's showing that while Indy is still young and kind of stupid action hero, he knows what he's still an academic. Yeah, he really cares about being respectful to the culture. Like, I do enjoy that scene.
He is actually, on one level or another, an anthropologist, right?
Yes.
So, like,
yes. Archaeologist, but yes.
Well, I know he's an archaeologist, but that kind of bumps elbows a lot with anthropology.
Okay.
You have to
fair.
Traditions of, but yeah, I think, I don't know, those moments kept me going. But then there were a lot of conversations and things like one piece of evidence that I would say for the movie kind of like undercutting itself, or at least undercutting the dialogue and scenes, is when they're sitting down to dinner at the castle, and Indy's trying to have like this fact-finding conversation with the prime minister and kind of also the prince,
Maharaja, yeah.
Maharaja, that's right. That's their name. And then the entire scene's focus is completely pulled by Short Round and Willie having a terrible time with their food. So, like, no one cares about the conversation that's happening between Indy and the Prime Minister. Everybody is watching them freak out about the food and the eyes rolling up in the soup and them fighting over the hat and who's going to throw up in it. Those moments are fun, but they completely take away from the value that is actually happening in the scene. So I have a hard time when your movie isn't plotted well in that way.
That scene has also become controversial in
because of
the
portrayal of the food.
Yeah, of course. Like, I mean, it's straight up insulting in many ways. There was a brief argument that it was intentional, and the people in the palace brought out fake food to screw with the white
Mm-hmm.
people. And I was like, that's bullshit. Don't you try to you didn't kill that many monkeys just
Yes.
to screw with them. Don't you lie to me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. My yeah, I don't know. I think you make good points. Again, I think it's because I've just seen it more times now that I've just accepted the kind of movie that it is, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
looking
Well,
for. I think its potential again when you keep saying like you didn't expect it to be this kind of movie or you expected it to be something different. I didn't even go into these back in the day expecting maybe the same amount of substance that you are expecting. I look at these as just really, really good 80s movies that are really fun, and there's special effects to be talked about to no end. But as far as
that's
story
true.
elements go, I don't really think we're going to need to go to Indiana Jones for fantastic examples
No.
of writing. Though I guess you are the wrong person to ask about that given your
Yes.
focus.
I really like a well-written story, okay?
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. But you got a
Hmm.
couple more weeks before we can move on to a saga like
It's
that.
okay. I'm interested to see how it develops because I kind of have this belief that once you get to know your characters, you cannot help but become more story
I
oriented.
agree.
So
Yeah.
I am interested to see what happens moving forward. Um, I just think I expected, at the very least, I expected a main character that I would be attached to in some way or another because everyone talks about how much they love these movies. And I think the first one, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, I feel like is they go out of their way to make you dislike him sometimes. And like it's a very interesting choice in terms of writing. I don't think it's necessarily the bad one. It's just that was the only thing that could have kept someone who is emotionally invested in your film emotionally invested as if we liked the main character because
Mm-hmm.
your story writing it's not much there, bud. Like,
Right.
you know, it's you got some plot setup happening, but in terms of caring about your characters or seeing your characters grow and develop over time, like that just doesn't really happen in these films. And if that wasn't your main goal, then you have to have a character, maybe not your main character, but you have to have a character that's consistently there that you're trying to root for. And I don't know that we
We
have that.
we do have to remember though who the target audience really would have been and if they really were caring
That's
about
fair.
emotional growth and arcs
Well, okay,
and
they wouldn't say it that way, but everybody looks to stories for a mirror, essentially. And sometimes it's like an illusion. Like people who
mhm.
watch these films and really enjoy them want to see themselves on those adventures, right?
Yeah, a smart badass who
And
does cool things and everyone's like,
yeah,
"Yes, that's me."
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's fun. And I'm actually totally here for those types of stories. I
Mhm.
just thought because this franchise has such a reputation or such a following, there would at least be some emotional buy-in as well. And it seems to be mostly just sort of like wishful dreaming mostly and some pretty cool special effects like you mentioned like the fight like I'm trying not to knock the fight scenes actually because they are very interesting and
Yeah,
engaging
the
fight
fight
scenes. I
scenes.
like them a
Right,
lot,
yeah. I want to
but
come
they're just not.
into the positive corner and say the fight scenes are fairly solid. There's like no
Mhm.
shaky cam. They take place over a bunch
Mhm.
of environments. This one especially with like
Mhm.
the voodoo doll where like he's fighting and being
Mhm.
stabbed and then there's two fights at the same
Mhm.
time like and the one in
Mhm.
his room where the guy ended up getting sucked into the fan. Every time
Mhm.
I watch these movies, I forget how relentlessly violent they are. Because I kind of think of them as like, yeah, these are the movies that like 10 and 12-year-olds were watching in the 80s. And I'm like, they shouldn't have been watching this then. Because like within the first 5 minutes, he impales a guy on a lit shish kebab, which is just, that's a lot. That's a lot for this franchise. I mean, I guess by this point, we saw three different dudes' faces melt in the last movie, so it's par for the course. But I do tend to forget just how incredibly violent these movies are because like we have now 38,000 MCU movies, but only one of
Yes,
them has a dude.
38,000.
Only one of them has a dude get sucked into a fan, and we only see the blood for like 0.1 seconds. The first Indiana Jones movie has a dude get devoured by a fan.
And you see it a little bit, at least.
Like there's lots of face melting, and there's stuff in the next one. There's stuff in the one after that. I can't remember for sure how visually aggressive the fifth one is. I've only seen it the one time, but like there's plenty ahead as well. But this one I haven't even mentioned yet, the heart being ripped out of a chest. Like,
oh, I know.
That's intense. That's intense.
I liked that quite a bit, actually. I mean, I doubt that antagonistic cult was well researched based off the fact that they seem to go monotheistic with Shiva.
It's also it's a lot of things. They've got voodoo elements. They've got straight up satanic elements. And that's another reason why in some ways it hasn't aged super well. Is like it seems we're demonizing foreign cultures. But it is fictitious enough that I think it gets away with it.
It is. Yeah. Well, and I think it also is aided by the fact that the people he's trying to help are also of that heritage and tradition, right? They have contrasting beliefs, and he takes the side of one of the beliefs.
Yes.
And then the whole movie portrays the other belief in this really super negative light. And I bet if I were to do some research into all that, you'd find
it's probably not that bad.
Well, that, or at the very least, like it's not. Those are not the things that were happening in that cult. Maybe the cult was terrible, but I doubt that anything we saw in that movie had any sort of real connection to reality or real traditions at all.
Probably not.
Yeah. That said, the dangling over a lava pit is a classic. I like that. I liked that the stones weren't flashy. I like they were more of an idea.
And they were. I like the glow effect though, like just making like more literally. I like they weren't flashy. It felt warm, which is something that Spielberg adds to all of the god items in these movies. He has a name for it. It's like the heavenly glow or the god glow or something like that. But it's more subtle, and you have to like look into it to find this. But it's applied to the idol at the beginning of the first movie. And if you're really looking, the eyes in the idol actually move. I forgot to mention this because it as well is magic. So far in 2 movies, 3 different mythologies straight up exist. I'm not trying to besmirch any Christianity, anything. In this world, it fully exists. And then in the next one, which is we know it's the Holy Grail. That's not a spoiler. We knew that. I'm assuming. Didn't we?
I mean, I've seen the end of that one, so yeah.
Okay, yeah, so you know that. So I meant to ask that last week, but now that we've seen the second one, like, how do you feel about these franchises, these movies where like multiple gods just straight up exist, and they don't like we could just interact with their remnants in different ways? Like, it's intriguing to me.
I actually find that sort of world building pretty interesting. I think what I find most appealing about it is not maybe the classic, really anything could exist sort of mentality that's like almost a compromise on like world beliefs or systems. But what I like about it is it acknowledges the fact that the people who lived in times before us were not stupid people. They were not educated like we were educated. And they were not, they don't have as much knowledge about how the world works, but they observed things and passed on what they learned to other people. And that's what became our myths and legends. And we have a tendency in the modern era to deflate them or treat them as unimportant or anything like that. And really their value is a lot more metaphorical than anything else. But I like the idea that we as a society have tossed something out that actually is kind of significant or important. Like, the idea that there could have been things beyond our current understanding happening in their worlds, and they were just telling us the honest truth about it, and we went, yeah, sure, you guys have great imaginations. Like,
let me take your idols. The gold. I like the gold.
Yeah.
That was a very thought out answer, and I'm just over here like, I think it's cool. I want Indiana Jones 6 God Wars. Like, I want them all to cross over.
I didn't expect any of even the movies themselves don't really conclude why these objects work. Like they attribute it to what the stories say at the end because they're like, what else would it be? But they don't actually break it down and be like, yeah, they don't have any conversations, or at least at this point, they haven't had any conversations with legit gods. And God's been like, yeah, that's my thing. I imbue it with power, right? So it's more of just like these things are incredibly powerful artifacts that we don't understand fully yet, but we know to treat them with respect. And that is a cool angle of world building for me. I don't think it's inconsistent.
I like that. Hold on to that when we watch the fourth one, because it took me a while to remember that. And I think that's one reason why people didn't like the fourth one. There are a lot of reasons not to like the fourth one, but remembering that specific point helps it make way more sense and actually fit into the world perfectly. We'll just put a pin in that for half a month.
Okay.
But yeah, that's Temple of Doom. Do you have any like final thoughts or like a rating? Because like for me, at the end of the day, I think it's like a solid B or B plus depending on the mood. I like putting it on sometimes just to be in the background, but I also just because like almost all of it's really enjoyable, but at the same time, if you're like spaced out, it does kind of just keep moving because of the lack of just conversation. After they find the hidden passageway, it kind of doesn't stop except for him to go through his mind trickery.
Yeah.
Which is like, again, I don't think it's awful. I think it is entertaining, but it is, for a first viewing, it is kind of a lot. But I find that the longer it's been since I've seen it the first time, I do enjoy this one a lot.
I think it's definitely better than the first one. I like the first one, and I feel like it's worth saying that. I think I gave the first one like a 7 out of 10, if I'm remembering correctly. This one would probably be, I don't know, maybe an 8, like an 80%, like you're saying, a B. I like that it tried. I like that it tried to have more conversations. I like that it tried to put more structure and character development into its story. I like that it actually used the characters' relationships a little bit more. Like I liked that. But I feel like it fell short on the execution of a lot of that stuff. Like I like Willie's character being the antithesis of, well, I was thinking the antithesis of the Indiana Jones character. She does not want to go on an adventure. She wants to have her good, comfortable life. She likes pretty things, but she's not about to risk herself for it, right? Fame and glory is stupid. She talks about her dad, I think, who was a magician, and he did those fun things all the time. Grandfather. He did that fun life all the time, and then he ended up penniless and died, right? Like she's like, that's not what I want for my life. And I like that they introduce her like that. I like that she doesn't shut up about that because that's a strong thing, but I don't know that it's totally executed well because she ends up getting on my nerves rather than me feeling like she has a valid point. So like there's a lot that I feel like they tried to do that I'm interested to see them continuing to try in later films, but I'm not feeling like they nailed it on this one.
Okay, cool. The comments are gonna let you know what they think of you.
Oh, I know. The internet can disagree with me. That's okay. They're not going to change my opinion.
That's very true. I know that. How'd you feel about the little callback to when he's got two guys with swords and he goes to just take out his pistol and doesn't have it?
Yeah, I liked that. I thought that was a really smart way to nod back to that iconic scene and then actually make him engage in the fight.
Yeah.
Anyway, like rather than just repeating it, they were like, you don't have your gun now, what are you gonna do? And he's like, fine, I guess I'll fight.
It is okay. Again, my last little point here, my last little nitpick. Again, since this is supposed to take place before the first one, it's weird that he's so adamant in the first one that he doesn't believe in magic.
It is weird.
When he's
I wanted to mention that earlier in our conversation. It just didn't quite fit in.
He's
but
straight up experienced magic and says as much. I understand its power now. It's like, the fuck you do? Because you forget? But whatever. That's Temple of Doom. Woohoo!
Woo!
We'll make an outro one day.